Okay, so EPNT, what is it? Keep it simple, keep it real, but today just want to have a chat about the new EPNT or ePoynt antenna from Poynting Antennas. And I'm joined by Stephen, CEO of Poynting. Stephen, thanks for joining me today.
Yes, thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always nice to speak to you.
Thank you. I guess the antenna, it's been around for probably almost a year now, but maybe it's one of those antennas that really just needs to get discussed a bit more so we can actually get, like myself and everybody else out there, to get an understanding of the opportunities and the benefits of this antenna idea. Now, there are two antennas, EPNT 1 and 2. So actually, Stephen, just what's the deal with the EPNT? Do you have any introduction ideas to share on that antenna?
Yes, maybe I can just quickly show you this is what we call the ePoynt, and maybe a lot of you and a lot of your customers probably already know our XPOL2 antenna. So our XPOL2 antenna has made quite a lot of waves internationally. We are selling containers full to customers, and very popular, high-performing antenna. And a lot of our customers said, with the XPOL2 antenna, can they place the router inside the same enclosure? And what we have done with this antenna is effectively that. We've just increased the size a little bit over here at the back, placed a cover on where you can put your own router inside. We've also found that a lot of router companies offer antennas with their products, but maybe they are not suitable for the application that they're using it for. So what you can do with our XPOL2 in this enclosure called the ePoynt, either the ePoynt 1 or the ePoynt 2, is that you can have a directional or an omnidirectional antenna all inside the same enclosure. So take your router, or the router, and implement it inside over here. You've already got a fantastic antenna. You've got a IP65 enclosure for your equipment, mounted onto the wall, mounted onto a pole, and all that you need to connect here is a Ethernet cable, Cat5, Cat6 cable, to a power over PoE source. Power your router inside, and you can easily set your router in both stages, basically in access point mode, and you're receiving an LTE or 5G signal and distributing it over the area that's intended. You could also use just the LTE port connected to the Ethernet cable, have access points inside your house, inside your business, and you still have your Wi-Fi distributed throughout your premises quite easily with this unit. So it's all in one, everything's together. You don't have cable losses between your antenna and your router that's implemented. And so your throughput will be better, the availability, and just your general uptime would be better because you don't have those additional losses.
Was there any concern or temperature or stuff like that, or is it kind of manageable?
Yeah, so we've done quite a number of temperature tests, and we have found that the ambient temperature inside depends on the situation, but can go up with 10, maybe 20 degrees above the ambient temperature. And so what we advise is that customers that have a router, let's say your temperature in the vicinity is about, let's say, gets to 40 degrees, just make sure that your router can work up to 60 degrees. I think a lot of the routers out there actually work at much higher temperatures, and it's just to make sure that your spec of your router is within that tolerance. And if that's the case, then we haven't seen any problems deployed in that sense. I think in areas where you have extreme heat and you do have a router that's maybe that doesn't have such a large temperature range, it is possible to put a small little canopy on top, whether that's just made out of a few tiles or just some kind of a mesh or something like that, just to create a little bit of shade, put it under the rooftop, and you'll have a bit of shade on it if that is necessary. But we haven't found that necessary. We've implemented in our offices, not in, but on top of the building. And we also over there don't have any issues. So we constantly monitor the temperature of the equipment inside. And as I said, 10 to 20 degrees above what is expected. But I think that is completely manageable, and it doesn't cause any issues that we have found.
You can basically have the ePoynt 1 and ePoynt 2. What's the most important difference between the two models that customers can expect? I mean, one is more omni and one is omni and directional.
Yes, what I mentioned in the beginning was that the ePoynt 2 is based on the XPOL 2. So that is our directional cross-polarized antenna. So on the ePoynt 2, we've used that high-performing antenna. And what we've done additionally, we've included another 2 omnidirectional LTE 5G antennas plus 2 Wi-Fi antennas. So it's effectively directional, but it also has an omnidirectional component. So if you have a router with 2 ports, a 2x2 MIMO, LTE, or 5G router, connected to the directional ports, but you also have the option of the omnidirectional ports. If you have a 4x4, you connect it to all 4 ports, and you'll have a bit of the best of both worlds, where you have a directional antenna connected to 2 ports, and then you have the omnidirectional to the other ports. The key difference is that directionality gives you additional performance. So if you have an LTE router connected to it, you would have better throughput, better signal levels, and so on, better availability. But the disadvantage is if the base station goes down, then you are directed at that specific base station. It could go down for maintenance or because there's a fault or even congestion reasons. And if you have directed your antenna towards that base station, you would actually, as the antenna, and I don't want to use the word amplify because it's not really what happens, but you almost amplify the signal in one direction, and what you do is you attenuate the signal in other directions. So other base stations that could be quite good in the area, you're actually making them appear weaker to the router for the benefit. And as you are also aware, C2I plays a big role. So directional antennas are very important to implement in scenarios like that. But from a reliability perspective, if you have omnidirectional antennas, it just makes it better for when that specific base station goes down, and your router can then roam over different base stations, select or reselect different base stations, then your reliability improves. So what happens with a ePoynt 2, you have both. You have 2 directional antennas and you have 2 omnidirectional antennas. But there's a lot of our customers that only want omnidirectional antennas. So that is why we have the ePoynt 1. So the ePoynt 1 is an antenna with 4 omnidirectional antennas on the LTE 5G ports, plus 2 Wi-Fi ports. And then with both antennas, there's the option of adding a GPS if you need that.
Where would the GPS be? Inside the back end of it?
Yes, if you look inside, there should be a little platform on the inside.
There is. Yeah, now I see it. I didn't notice that. So that little one?
Yes, that little platform over there. Okay. So the idea with that is one can put a PC board GPS on there. There are some off-the-shelf GPSs that would fit in there with some difficulty, but it would fit in there. But it's actually made as an option that we can supply it with a GPS if that is needed.
I didn't know that. So now I learned something actually rather than just asking questions. That's pretty awesome. Of course, the Omni antenna, I guess I'm probably always going to focus on the directional one because that's kind of, for me, what you said just now is to me a key advantage. Is it's a great antenna going forward. Obviously, when you hand it like this without the backplate, it clearly looks like the XPOL 2. But if somebody has this one, and I'm probably just stating the obvious here, but it's important to understand. you can put this thing in and you kind of feel, because of the shape and because of our history knowing XPOL2, there we go, I want to face that way. But with the Omni, it doesn't really matter at all because this thing is just going anywhere.
So what's happening with the Omni, it's similar to installing a router on a pole or on a building. What happens is you've got Omni antennas inside, but because it's on the pole or on the building, you would end up with something that's quasi-Omni. So obviously the building would shadow that, the router would shadow that. So it's still Omni because of the area that you add it, that you install it, but your radiation patterns would cover the area minus obviously the equipment that is installed in the back. So if you have a small little router installed at the back, or it's mounted on a building, it's the same as actually implementing an omnidirectional antenna directly to the wall of a building, or you'd put it on a pole. What happens is your radiation patterns are skewed a little bit, but I think that is actually quite perfect, because if you have a pole mounted, you wouldn't want the radiation to go into the pole. Not that it can, but rather take that and spread it to the rest of the area.
Oh, yeah, there was one question I had, because I seem to get this question a few times, and I just wanted to ask you, although it's probably an obvious answer. So I think a lot of people are starting to understand the benefit of the cable loss, so it's not being there basically. But I'm getting questions of people wanting this on a caravan or a vehicle or so forth, or external to a moving device, and then they say, well, there's a 2x2 or 4x4 Omni, let's go for this one. This is obviously not designed for a vehicle. Correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, but this is really meant for a static setup.
Yeah, the weird thing is that the XPOL2, if I go back to the XPOL2 antenna, which is just the directional antenna, that antenna plus the XPOL1 antenna, which is also quasi omnidirectional antenna, which is also not meant for vehicles, we see more and more installations on vehicles. There's obviously nothing wrong with that, but it's not made for that purpose. The same with the ePoints. If I relate that same idea to the ePoints, it's not made for vehicular implementation. Therefore, we have other antennas that would be perfectly good for that. But you know, sometimes you have a solution in mind and you want to implement that. I think it will be quite fine on a caravan or something like that. It wouldn't be my first choice. If it's more as a semi-permanent installation, in the sense you arrive at your caravan site and you put up the antenna, perfect, it will work perfect. I just would not want to see this antenna waving in the wind on top of the caravan while it's driving. I think that would not be the best implementation for it.
I think the best I've seen here in Australia, I don't know if it's a national product or international product, but these TV antennas that actually can be they're on a mast, and then when you stop, they can actually make upright, and then you can turn them around. And I've seen that a few times. People actually mount this on the TV antenna. So obviously they kill the TV antenna. And that was for the XPOL2, and then that goes up, and then from inside the caravan, you can kind of just look for the best connection. So
yes, and that can be perfect. Yes, that is a perfect implementation for it.
I mean, of course, you have this little plant at the bottom. That's the metal plate, which you can see I've already poked a few holes in it, but it comes with just a center one for the data cable, and then the other ones are available for you to remove for if you have other needs for other access points into the device itself. I guess the one that to me comes to mind most as something that people may probably want to do is something like the SIM card extension.
SIM card extender.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that would then basically make the it's a sealed unit. So I'm looking around here. That would be the box that goes upstairs, and then you can put your SIM card in there. Although the router, like this 360 I have here, would be hidden inside somewhere.
So just to comment on the faceplate at the bottom. So the intended market for this antenna is actually for companies that want to do larger scale integration. So in other words, somebody that might be working with the hospitals or construction sites or or working with mining sites or minefields or something like that, and they want to deploy quite a large number. In the case of volumes, what's the intention of this gland plate is at the bottom is that we can customize that. So if you wanted N-type connectors, additional N-type connectors because you wanted to add omnidirectional antennas coming out the bottom, you wanted maybe 2 Ethernet ports or USB ports, we can do that if the volumes are there. But what we've done is we've also said that we can't only sell this for volume projects, and therefore we have provided a bit more of a generic faceplate. So for the normal customer that would purchase this, provide the Ethernet gland over here, so the Ethernet cable can go out, and then there's some holes that are sealed over here that you could push out and you could use for other purposes. So it's a little bit more generic, but the idea is if you have a specific project with or specific routers that you want to implement and you need access to certain of the ports, then we can adapt that quite easily, and we can actually offer that product in that format.
Of course, I'm looking at this now. I have 2 SMAs here for Wi-Fi on this side, and I have the 4 SMAs on this side for the for various 4G connections, 4G/5G these days. I guess that's kind of as a side comment, I guess, because as a 4x4, it really gets very appealing to the 5G routers that are coming out. But you would assume, and I'm kind of, again, for us as RF shop, that's obviously a positive for us, because if the assumption is that somebody needs to buy cables as well, I would just do a personal shout out, say, come to RF shop and buy the cables if you're in Australia. But you would still need the customer to actually get their own connection and cables for whatever their router then needs. Because it'll be probably going to be SMA, but it could be TNC as well, and whatever is needed. So.
Yes, that's exactly the case. Is that we wanted to make it universal, so that you can put in just about any router that fits into that space. So some routers come out with TNCs, others with SMAs, and even in some cases with N-type connectors. We also have RP-SMA connectors. So the idea was that we keep or that we implement a small little fly lead, if we can say it that way, is that you can purchase from us different type of cables. We can supply that to you. You can make up your own cables if you like, and it just makes it so much more versatile. I would say that companies like RF Shop, it would be good to keep SMA to SMAs or SMA to RP SMAs, because I suppose most of the routers comply to those type of ports. But in the cases where something weird, then you can just make up your own cable and connect it.
I'm even thinking router boards. So if you get a router board, that might just have UFL connected, so then you don't even have a proper connection.
And quite interesting that you mentioned that topic, is this enclosure is actually made for the router boards as well. So if you have the bare bone board and you want to implement that, if it's got an MCX connector or any other type of weird connector in there, it's so easy to implement it. I know to get hold of those cables are not always easy, but it does make it much more versatile than what we had the cables implemented already. It's actually also amazing that these cables can be quite expensive sometimes. So we decided not to include the cables, otherwise it would just push up the price of the product quite a lot if we try to implement all the different type of combinations of cables.
Now that you mentioned that, I guess I probably could read it up in the data sheets, but these little, is it M4, M3 screw holes? There's various in there. Like, is that actually meant for router board or any support structures that somebody might want?
Yeah, so we've taken a few routers and we've implemented some let's say pre-made holes that one can implement those routers on. I don't want to mention names now, but there are a few router boards that would fit by default. Obviously, not everything would fit by default, but in that case, what we have made is that one can actually use self-tapper screws that will go through the plastic if you need to. If it's a volume project, again, we can implement those holes for you in our during our production, and it's quite easy to fit the boards there. So, but we hope that the majority of boards would actually fit inside. But there are quite a few routers that would not fit on those holes, but that's okay, because there's multiple ways to actually implement it. One would be to use self-tapper screws into the plastic. We also have quite a few customers that use double-sided tape if it's on a stationary implementation. So all of these different type of methods are available for your customers.
I mean, it's also easy to just make an adapter plate for yourself if you measure up these holes and do whatever you
Exactly. So the screw holes are already there. If you have access to a laser cutter or even tin snips, you can cut your own, or just take a piece of plastic, screw that down, screw your router to that piece of plastic, and it's actually quite easy to implement. So again, we try to keep that as generic as possible so that you have multiple options to do that.
Yeah. I think for me, now that I think about this, it's good to know, and kind of comforting to know that those holes can be used, because I think a lot of people would be scared if they see a hole and think, no, I'm going to break whatever's behind it. So
just a comment is that the current ePoints that are available are fully 5G compliant, so they work from 698 all the way to 3.8 gigs. And as you're probably aware, some of the 5G frequencies, not necessarily only in Australia, but also in other countries, are specifically in the lower sub-gigahertz frequency bands, like 800 or 900, even in 1800 megahertz being deployed. But the vast majority is in the 3.5 gigs. So that's anywhere from 3.3 to 3.8 gigahertz. And then additionally to that, a new variant that we will be releasing very soon is one that will go all the way from 617, that is includes the band 71 for the US and quite a few other markets, and then also goes up to 4.2 gigahertz. So that'll just extend the LTE frequency bands for the networks and the countries that need that.
Is that going to stay in the same form factor? So it looks the same, just
yes, and it's in exactly the same form factor.
There's no surprise that we're looking a lot at the Teltonicas and get that in there. So that's definitely an idea to follow for us. One thing in the box. So in the box, of course, you get the antenna itself, which is, when you get it, it's all sealed up. And then you also have this box with all the rest of the mechanics, which you already had assembled. So in there is basically a few brackets and stuff to get you going. A few things.
Yeah, so we provide some of the accessories just to make it easier for the customer to implement. So whether you want to put onto a wall, you'll see it's got the knock-in screws. It's got the pipe clamp. So all of the accessories are available if you want to. For the normal deployment scenario, are included in that little package. Yes.
It all makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to people who watch this video afterwards. But come on, ask either ask you guys at Poynting or ask us at RF Shop. I get a lot of questions from non-Australian customers through the YouTube channel anyway, so I would kind of just invite anyone, just happy to kind of guide you either to yourself at Poynting, or we'll just see what we could do to help. But yeah, thanks, Stephen. That was awesome. Thanks for making time to talk about this thing, and we'll just make some more noise about it on our website, and good luck to your ventures in getting this to the rest of the world as well.
Yes, thank you, David. I appreciate that, and I hope you're going to sell a lot of these enclosures or ePoints, and yeah, hopefully your customers are going to be quite happy with them. So, well, I believe they are going to be quite happy with these.
It makes perfect sense, and stupid as it is, I now suddenly have GPS as well up my bucket here, so more features. Thanks, Stephen. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, actually. So I hope that we can have a similar discussion about some other awesome stuff soon.
Yes, thank you, David, and I hope you have an excellent weekend, and yeah, that your customers are happy to receive these antennas.